Herr Bundespräsident Hans-Rudolf Merz,
Federal President
of Swiss Confederation, Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, distinguished heads of state, heads of government, dear friends, welcome to the World Economic Forum Annual Meeting 2009. A very special event at a very special moment. What we are experiencing today is the birth of a new era, a wake-up call to overhaul our institutions, our systems, and above all, our thinking and our actions, and to adjust our attitudes and values to the needs of a world which rightly requires a much greater degree of responsibility and accountability. People have labeled this crisis as the worst ever and in many other catastrophic terms. Here in Davos, we do not want to hear about such statements again, even if they are true. We want to concentrate on how we can move out of the crisis and how we can shape the post-crisis world in a constructive manner. Today, people from every corner of the globe ask, how was it possible that decisions could be taken led by greed or incompetence and with no effective oversight, decisions that had terrible consequences not only for the global economy, but also for real people who have lost their jobs, their homes, and their pensions. They are bewildered, confused, scared, and angry. They may not understand what went wrong, but they are clear that their leaders have let them down. They now look to those leaders, corporate, political, and societal, not only to say sorry, but to repair the damage to their families and communities. Gathered here in this room are many of the world's most influential leaders. We cannot sidestep our responsibility to work together to rebuild our economies and institutions. To be concrete, we have 5 objectives for us to achieve over the next 5 days. First, we will support governments and particularly the G8 in their efforts to address the systemic risks in the financial systems to stabilize and to relaunch the economy. We have worked together with the respective governments to make sure that all the relevant questions and issues are integrated into our discussions and that we can create here, midway between the G20 summits in Washington last October and the G20 summit in London next April, a true global multi-stakeholder partnership supporting bold but necessary actions and policy changes. In this respect, the financial community, which is well represented here and which will remain an essential factor of global growth, is not only part of the problem, but is also an indispensable part of the solution. And the causes are not just regulated to one community. We are all, in some way, responsible for not recognizing the risks of a world completely out of balance. We should have listened more to those who saw the signs on the wall and who also spoke out here in this room. Denial of the unpleasant or politically inconvenient truths, combined with herd instinct, caused us to rely on systems which were unrealistic and unsustainable, and which, in addition, were undermined and abused by some who acted in unethical and fraudulent ways. What we need now is not only to look back and to conduct a thorough assessment of the system's failures and the mistakes we made, but more importantly, to look forward and to mobilize all people with one mission in mind: to rebuild trust, not only based on more liquidity in the financial system, but also based on the fundamental pillars of honesty, transparency, and predictability. The second objective for our meeting is to make sure that we look at our world in a holistic, systemic way. The financial and economic crisis is not the only issue that needs a global, multi-stakeholder response. In our Global Risks Report 2008, we identified 36 risks that must be addressed simultaneously if we want to avoid stumbling from one crisis to another and ending up in a scenario of enduring global chaos. We will deal with practically all those issues here. The third objective of this annual meeting is to start a year-long process to help design the systems and institutions that the world needs to really cooperate and to confront global challenges in a much more proactive way. To do so, we must consider the significant changes which have occurred since World War II. Today, we have to confront a much higher degree of complexity and time pressure. We have to recognize the shifts of political power and economic power from west to east and from north to south. We have to incorporate much more expertise and knowledge into our global decision-making. We have to use the force of social networking as an empowerment tool. We have to listen more intensively to the next generation. All these imperatives will be part of a government-sponsored initiative launched during this meeting, engaging all forum communities. The fourth objective of this annual meeting is to better shape the ethical value base for business, highlighting a clear differentiation between industrial, financial, and service companies that provide true value to society and those that make money just through pure paper transaction and speculation. Profit is a major driver of business, but it is clear it cannot be profit at all costs. And it is also clear that self-indulgence cannot replace reasonable competitive remuneration. Since the founding of the World Economic Forum in 1971, when I defined in a book the so-called stakeholder theory, our premise is that business ultimately has to serve not only shareholders but all stakeholders, which means business must serve society at large. The fifth and final objective of this annual meeting is to reconstruct the global economy. Yes, we are in the midst of an enormous challenge, but we are also at the threshold of many promising breakthroughs and technologies, as the strong presence of our technology pioneers here demonstrates. Today, a great opportunity exists to generate a new wave of economic growth based on technologies and innovations that generate services and products which help particularly society, such as meeting societal needs in eco-efficiency, in healthcare, in transportation, in people empowerment, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, what the world needs today is integration and cooperation. We will never meet the challenges if we want to do it all alone. The purpose of the World Economic Forum is not to take decisions, but to act as a force for reflection and connection, connecting ideas, proposals, stakeholders, countries, and cultures. In conclusion, I hope that with your engagement and leadership, Davos can act as it has done already a century ago, as a healing and revitalizing force, as a magic mountain, as a true sanatorium for the world, its economy, and its society. I have now the great honor to ask the President of the Swiss Confederation, Hans-Rudolf Merz, to address us on behalf of the host country. But I would like to use this opportunity, and I'm changing into German. Ich möchte ganz herzlich nicht nur Sie,
to express welcome not only to you, President, but also to take this opportunity to extend words of gratitude for the hospitality and the cooperation with the Swiss authorities, with the federal government, with the canton of Graubünden and the region of Davos. And I would like, therefore, to thank not only you, President Merz, but also all of the other representatives of the Swiss Federal Council, Councillor Calmiret, and also, who is also here today, but also President Chiara of the National Council, Simona G. Cortesi, Alain Berset, the government presidents of the canton of Graubünden, Hans-Jörg Kratzel, Kosten Faria, as well as the Landesmann Hans-Peter Mechel. And in this regard, please allow me to extend special words of thanks to the people of Davos for their hospitality and welcome and their cooperation. President Merz, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Switzerland is one of the most open countries in the world. Here, people and ideas have long found the freedom to be heard and the freedom to be developed. It is in that spirit that Professor Schwab created the World Economic Forum as an outstanding platform for exchange of ideas. The forum is needed now and these days more than ever. I would like to thank you, Professor Schwab, and the organizers for arranging this year's annual meeting and for its choice of theme. On behalf of Swiss government, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all, ladies and gentlemen, to Davos and Switzerland. We are extremely proud that alongside leading figures from the business world, so many political dignitaries are also doing us the honor of visiting the country. I hope that you will be comfortable in these wonderful surroundings and in these next days at Davos. Switzerland, however, is also one of the world's leading financial centers. So the theme of this year's annual meeting, Shaping the Post-Crisis Agenda, is particularly appropriate. I would like to make 3 assertions to launch this debate. Firstly, there needs to be a debate, a new debate on values. In large sections of the global economy, but particularly in the financial centers, the pursuit of growth has led to a sidelining or even a denial of values. Billions of dollars in assets and thousands upon thousands of jobs have been destroyed as a result. Traditional and proven rules have been sacrificed in the pursuit of profit. No one would seriously argue that growth is not needed to achieve progress and prosperity, and to manage as well population growth. But the financial crisis and the economic downturn have made it dramatically clear that growth should be built on quality, growth should be built on sustainability, and growth should be built on solid values. The notion of more of the same must be replaced by more of something better. In other words, branches and businesses and industries make positive contributions to growth and to prosperity when they adhere to a strong set of values, whereby values are a set of shared convictions. You, ladies and gentlemen, you may be familiar with the famous examples. A renowned American industrialist in the 20s of the last century once wrote, "Take the industrial idea. What is it? The true industrial idea is not to make money. The industrial idea is to express a serviceable idea, to duplicate a useful idea by as many as thousands as there are people who need it." Another example is the private banking sector, which evolved around 1800 in Geneva and elsewhere in an environment that at the time was entirely unregulated by the state. It is typical rules were just simple, like know your customer, be prudent when lending money, closely monitor your dossiers, have respect for money and risk. The solidity of the banking system is based on such principles. Today, these values have been somewhat lost. It is time that we are rediscovering them. My second assertion is that regardless of how the financial crisis evolves, a new philosophy needs to be adopted in respect of supervision and regulation in the financial sector. Globalization is extremely advanced. Consequently, global rules need to be developed for the supervision and the regulation of global players. Therefore, cross-border cooperation must become the norm. But all that is easier said than done, I know. Tendencies to regionalism and isolated single solutions undermine such efforts. In a globalized economy, regional crises have global consequences, and that is something we have to deal with. A further challenge is finding a responsible balance between the market and the states. Market failure must not result in state failure, and laissez-faire must not result in state monopoly. My third and last assertion, ladies and gentlemen, is that we should see the economic downturn as an opportunity for innovation. The Swiss writer Max Frisch rightly said that a crisis is a productive state. One just has to remove the aftertaste of disaster. The crisis provides a chance to better unite ecology and economy through innovation. In the post-war period, these two considerations have generally not got along very well. They have not spoken the same language. But over the years, however, their mutual understanding has greatly improved and grown. As part of this ongoing dialogue, the often spectacular results deriving from scientific research must be incorporated to a greater extent of product innovation. For example, the pioneering work on alternative sources of energy and power stations should lead to new and greener products. And the market for such products will grow, just as it did a century ago for the first generation of such engines. Ladies and gentlemen, given the array of eminent personalities from industry, from government and civil society assembled here, this annual meeting heralds to be one of the most important by far. I have no doubt that with regard to the themes I have outlined, it will also serve as a powerful catalyst in the search for sound solutions. And I wish you and for us that this WEF will be another success in the long history of successful WEFs. Congratulations, Professor Schwab. Thank you.
Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, you are our opening speaker this evening, and it's a special pleasure and a special honor, of course, and personal pleasure for me to welcome you at this opening session. The World Economic Forum has a history of relationship with your country since the beginning of the 90s. And we have met on the occasion of several meetings in the early 90s in St. Petersburg and afterwards in Moscow and again in St. Petersburg. But I remember vividly one opening session in the year 2000, just after you became acting president. And there was one participant here in this hall who asked the question, what can we expect from Vladimir Putin? In the meantime now, you have been president of the Russian Federation for 8 years, and now you are the president of its government at the forefront of handling the present economic crisis. Your country, as we all know, plays a pivotal role, and I might quote from a report of our Global Agenda Council on Russia. Not a single contemporary issue, starting with terrorism and ending with climate change, can be resolved without Russian participation. Russia has been and is a challenge for the global community. To deal with Russia adequately, the West must invest, and the rest of the world must invest in Russia in every sense of the word, and equally important, find ways to encourage Russia's inclusion in a world system. Prime Minister, your country has featured very prominently in the news over the last months, be it related to its politics with its neighbors, be it related to energy security, be it related to internal development in your country. We are all eager to hear from you what policies the Russian Federation will pursue. Some fear, and I may be here very open, some fear those policies will be confrontational. I hope, and I'm convinced, they will be cooperative. What is your answer? Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours. Welcome the Prime Minister of the Russian Federation.
Dear Mr. Schwab, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely grateful to Professor Schwab for his kind words addressed to Russia. I visited Davos quite often when I was working in St. Petersburg, and recently I didn't have opportunity to do so. It is extremely pleasant for me that Russia was given this opportunity to present its views on the issues of the global economy at this rather difficult time. I'm appreciative for this opportunity to share my considerations related to the developments in the global economy in Russia and to describe our plans and proposals. Mr. Schwab, in his address, suggested not to lean or delve into the future or into the sources or reasons for the recent development. I would not focus on that. But without discussing the reasons which brought the global economy to such a state, we would not be able to write the right prescription for curing the disease. Today we are witnessing a first really global economic crisis, and the speed of the crisis development beats every record. The current situation is often compared with the Great Depression of 1920s and 1930s of last century. Indeed, the parallels are obvious, but there is a strategic difference. In the era of globalization, the crisis touched upon everyone, all countries, regardless of their political or economic system. All of us are in the same boat. There is a notion of the perfect storm, when the natural elements come to one point and multiply their destructive capacity. This crisis looks exactly like this perfect storm. Of course, responsible and knowledgeable economists and politicians should always be ready for such a development. But indeed, it comes every time unexpectedly. Well, as winter comes to Russia unexpectedly every year. It so happened this time again, in the global economy, I mean. The crisis was hanging in the air, but the majority were not willing to notice this wave. In the recent month, every statement on this subject was started with the criticism addressed to the United States. I would not delve into this, but I would only remind you that 1 year ago we heard from this rostrum words uttered by our American friends about the fundamental stability and sparkling prospects for the U.S. economy. Today, the pride of Wall Street investment banks basically do not exist anymore. They have suffered losses surpassing their revenues in the last 25 years, cumulative. Only this example, better than any criticism, describes the real situation. Time has come for a revelation, and we need to calmly, without trying to apportion the blame, we need to objectively consider the in-depth sources. This crisis is the result of a number of factors. The collapse of the existing financial system and the result of the low quality of regulation and management. Therefore, enormous risks went unmanaged. An enormous disbalance has been accumulated in the recent years between the scale of financial operations and fundamental value of the assets, between the growing demand for international loans and the sources underlying such loans. The system of global economic growth also functioned. One center prints the money without restrictions and controls and uses the benefits, while the other part of the world produces inexpensive goods and saves the money printed by other states. In such a system, entire regions, including partially Europe, found themselves at the periphery of global economic processes that is beyond the pale of taking responsible financial and economic decisions. The generated wealth was distributed very unevenly, both within the country, any particular country, even in the highly developed countries, and between the countries and regions of the world. For many parts of the world, comfortable housing is unacceptable. High quality public health is also inaccessible. And the crisis has not changed this situation. This crisis also is a result of inflated expectations. The race of indexes and capitalization was the main dominant over the real efficiency of the companies and their production. Those inflated expectations existed not only in the business, but also among the consumers in terms of the standard of their personal consumption. We should be direct here in saying that was not supported by real opportunity. That was not a prosperity earned, but rather an earned, borrowed prosperity. And such a pyramid of expectation should sooner or later collapse. That is what is happening before our eyes. During the crisis, simple and populist recipes seem to be quite tempting, but treating the symptoms only, we in the end would result in even graver complications. At any rate, even at such drastic circumstances, we should avoid any steps which we would later be sorry about. We should consider what we should not do and what we would not do in Russia. We cannot afford being isolationistic and economically egotistic. During the G20 summit, we agreed to abstain from erecting barriers both in the trade and in the movement of the capital. If protectionism would prove to be inevitable, which we witness today, here we must all act with a good measure of responsibility. The second mistake is an excessive interference of the state. The belief in the omnipotence of the state. That is, of course, a natural reaction to the market failures, but instead of improving market mechanisms, there is a temptation to expand direct interference of the state in the economy. The anti-crisis measures would almost inevitably result in the concentration in the hands of the state of enormous assets. In the Soviet Union, that has become an absolute, which resulted in total absence of competitiveness of our economy. We paid a very dear price for that. And I am confident no one is willing to repeat our mistake. We shouldn't close our eyes on the dilution of the spirit of entrepreneurship, including of the principle of personal responsibility, be it entrepreneur, investor, shareholder, for their decisions. There are no grounds to believe that by removing the responsibility to the state, the results would be better. Here we have many business leaders in this room, and I understand that there is always temptation to use the almost endless source of the government and money. Well, this is an exhaustible resource, and not always efficient at that. One more thing, speaking of direct responsibility of the state, countering crisis should not result in financial populism or denial of responsible macroeconomic policies and hoarding of the state debt. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we are far from understanding the real scale of the crisis, but it is obvious that its depth and length would largely depend on how precisely we identify the direction of our actions and how professionally and with coordinated manner we would work. We should draw the line on the future, to lay it all on the table, to describe the real situation, to identify it, business needs, writing off bad debt and contaminated assets. That is a very painful process, and no one is especially willing to do that. They are just mostly take care of the capitalization, their bonuses and prestige. I believe that the mechanism of write-off should be efficient and be in line with the prevailing realities of our economy. Number two, together with clearing up the balances, it's time to do away with virtual money, bubble reporting and doubtable ratings. The notion of the real state of economy and real state of corporation should not be hostage to illusions, even if those authors, illusionists, are auditing companies and analytical companies. The idea is that the basis for the reform of standards of audit, accounting, rating system should be based on the fundamental value of assets. In other words, the evaluation of a business should be based on its ability to generate value added, rather than some subjective notions. In our view, the future economy should become an economy of real values. Of course, there is a question, how do we get there? Quite understandably, I do not have an answer yet. We should think together. That's why we get together here, thanks to Dr. Schwab. Number three, excessive dependence on, in the essence, the only reserve currency is dangerous for the global economy. It has become obvious to everyone, I believe. Therefore, it would seem appropriate to facilitate the emergence of a number of strong reserve currencies in regions. It's time to start substantive dialogue on transition make a transition smooth and irreversible. Number four, the majority of the countries puts their reserves in foreign currencies, and they want to be sure that they are reliable. In return, the issuers of those currencies are interested in the demand and the trust from other countries. So we have here mutual interest and mutual dependency. We need more openness in the monetary policies of the currency emitting countries. We must operate on the basis of macroeconomic and financial disciplines. In our view, such an angle is not unsubstantiated. Now, not only the architecture of global finances needs to be changed. We're talking about the fact that a system based on interaction of a number of major centers should replace a unipolar world, but we need to strengthen the system of global regulators based on international law, of course based on the system of multilateral agreements. Therefore, it is important to revisit the role of international organizations and institutions. I'm confident that we can build a more just and efficient global economic architecture. Within the framework of this presentation, it is impossible to give details of each and every parameter and index, but it is clear that all countries should have a guaranteed access to the necessary vital resources and new technologies and sources for development. Guarantees should be developed which would enable them to minimize the risks against a new crisis similar to the one we are living through now. Of course, we need to continue discussing all these issues, including within the framework of international fora, including at the April meeting of the G20 in London. The decisions that we take should correspond not only to the prevailing situation, but also take into account the needs of the post-crisis world. At the stage of coming out of crisis, the global economy may encounter a simple lack of energy resources, be threatened by the power outage of the future growth. 3 years ago at the G8 summit, we introduced an agenda devoted to energy, global energy security. It's time now to launch the effective mechanisms ensuring this. The only way to ensure energy security is the development of mutual dependency, including on the basis of sharing of assets without discrimination or double standards. Such mutuality and dependency creates a real responsibility of all. Unfortunately, the existing version of the Energy Charter has not become a working instrument capable of settling the emerging problems. The principles embodied by it are not implemented by the countries who signed and ratified it. They successfully forget about it when they need to. We suggest to launch development of the new legal basis for energy security. This initiative may play a positive economic role equal to that of concluding a treaty on the establishment of European Community of Coal and Steel. At last, we could manage to tie together producers and consumers on a basis of a real energy-based partnership. We understand that sudden, unpredictable changes of prices for energy is an enormous destabilizing factor for the global economy. Today, the collapse of the prices could result in the growth of irrational use of resources. On the one hand, investments in the energy saving and alternative energy sources would reduce, and also investments in the production of oil would also follow, which would result in an unmanageable growth of prices and new crisis, laying another charge or mine under the economy. It is necessary to return to balanced prices, balance between the demand and supply, and to read it to the maximum extent of the speculative components and based on multiple derivatives. One of the serious problems remains the transit of energy. There are two ways to resolve this, and both of them should be utilized. The number one is to introduce commonly acceptable market prices for the development of tariffs for transit. They should be stipulated in the international legal document. They deal together with hydrocarbons, nuclear energy, and electricity. Number two is developing the diversification of the transportation routes for energy. We have been engaged in it quite actively for the last few years. In the recent years, we've built such pipelines as Yamal Europe, Blue Stream to the Turkish Republic, and the Life proved that they are quite necessary and efficient. I'm confident that for the energy security of Europe, South Stream across the Black Sea and the North Stream across the Baltic Sea are also necessary. Their total capacity is about 85 billion cubic meters of gas per year. Some of our partners in Europe suggest that we increase this capacity. We are considering this, and I think that this is quite timely. Gazprom, together with their partners Shell, Mitsui, Mitsubishi, in the very near future would launch capacities to liquefy and transport natural gas produced at the island of Sakhalin. That would also serve as a contribution of Russia in the global energy security. The development of technologies and the market of the liquefied natural gas is quite promising, including from the standpoint of ensuring energy security. We also further develop our pipeline structure. The Baltic pipeline system is a testimony to this, which delivers up to 75 million tons of crude per annum. In the very short time, in a few years, from the zero, in a green field, we built both a port facility and a pipeline. In a few short years, reaching 75 million tons of handling. Now we designed the second system at the southern shore of the Bay of Finland. In the same region, we would handle up to 140 million tons of oil, crude and derivatives. The transport infrastructure would be developed in all areas. We're now completing the first train of the Eastern Siberia Pacific Ocean pipeline, including the oil terminal and the refinery. In the future, gas pipeline could also be laid in the same direction to the Pacific Ocean and China. Together with Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, we are launching a project of Caspian Pipeline. Of course, and I would like to especially underline this, in the course of implementation of this project and all similar projects, we first of all should think about programs related to environment. And the implementation of all those projects, of course, is accompanied always by environmental evaluations and the necessary investments in the rehabilitation.
Speaking in front of you, I have to speak about the impact of the global crisis on the Russian economy. Of course, we have been affected by the crisis in a very serious manner. However, unlike many other countries, we have accumulated large reserves, and they expand our capacity to go through a period of global instability. The crisis has revealed our problems. This is our focus on raw materials in our exports and in our economy. On the whole, our financial market is weak, and we need to develop some basic market institutions, and we need to enhance competition. We knew about these problems before. We tried to address them, but the crisis is encouraging us to be more active in our efforts without changing the strategy itself. The meaning of this strategy is to change the quality of our country in the forthcoming 10 or 12 years. Our anti-crisis policy is aimed at supporting our domestic demand, at social protection of our citizens, at creating new jobs. Like many other countries, we are lowering taxes on production, and we leave more cash within the economy. We're optimizing our government expenditure. We are also working on a platform for post-crisis development. We're confident that the leaders in the reconstruction of the world economy will be those who will create an attractive environment for global investment today. And we plan to create an enabling environment for business. We plan to enhance competition. We want to increase the domestic resources for the lending system. We plan to implement more transport infrastructure projects. Russia is a major exporter of food products and our contribution to the global food security will increase. We will also enhance innovative sectors of our economy, especially those where Russia has a competitive advantage. I mean, aerospace in the most general sense of the word, nuclear energy, and aircraft building. We are expanding our technological cooperation with foreign countries. Also will address energy saving and enhancing energy efficiency is one of the prerequisites for our further development. We'll continue to reform in our domestic energy sector. We will introduce a new system of domestic pricing, which will be based on economically justified tariffs. This is one of our priorities. It is important, among other things, to stimulate energy saving. We will also maintain our policy of openness for foreign investment. I believe that the economy of the 21st century is the economy of human beings and not factories. And the intellectual component in global economic development has grown exponentially. Therefore, we plan to focus on creating additional opportunities for our people to realize their potential. We are now a highly educated nation, but what we want is for Russian citizens to obtain the highest quality of education, which would be in demand. They need professional skills that will be in demand today and tomorrow. Therefore, we'll continue to pursue educational programs. We'll pursue exchanges, international exchanges. We will create an environment for academics, for professors, for students, regardless of their nationality, could choose our country as their domicile. The developments require that we reform our economy and modernize our social sector, and we're not going to waste this chance. I would like to say a couple of words about issues that go beyond the economic agenda. However, they are especially relevant today. Unfortunately, we hear increasingly often that the growth of military expenditure will help to address today's socio-economic problems. The logic here, the rationale here is rather simple. Additional military appropriations will, at the first stage, create new jobs. This is an obvious fact. This is a way of addressing joblessness and the crisis. In the short term, this measure may have an impact, but in reality, militarization does not help address the problem, but only pushes us to the background. It pumps a lot of financial and material resources out of our economy that could be used in a much wiser manner. I'm sure that reasonable restraint in military expenditure, along with strengthening global security, will yield a good economic dividend. I hope that this point of view will prevail around the world. On our part, we are willing to pursue disarmament efforts. I would like to draw attention to the fact that the economic crisis may deepen those negative trends that already exist in global politics. Recently, the world has seen an unprecedented growth in aggressive manifestations. I mean, the assault of the Georgian leadership in the Caucasus, the terrorist attacks in India, escalation of violence in Gaza Strip. These events may not be directly connected with each other, but they share something in common, and this is primarily the inability of international institutions to offer constructive solutions for regional conflicts. They are unable to be productive in addressing ethnic and interstate confrontations. Multilateral political mechanisms have turned out to be as inefficient as institutions of global financial and economic regulation. We have to be frank with ourselves. Provoking political and military instability, provoking regional and other conflicts is another way of detracting people's attention from domestic socio-economic problems in those countries. And we cannot rule out the possibility that such attempts will continue in the future. In order to prevent such a development, we need to enhance the efficiency of the system of international relations. We need to make it more secure and sustainable. The global agenda includes many items on which the interests of most countries objectively coincide and converge. This is the overcoming of the repercussions of the world economic crisis. These are our joint efforts to reform international financial institutions. These are efforts to improve regulatory mechanisms and ensure a greater energy security. This is what we should focus on altogether. We should also reduce the repercussions of the world food crisis. This item is still on our agenda. Russia is ready to make its own contribution to addressing major global challenges. We hope that all our partners in Europe and Asia and in America, and I'm also referring to the new administration of the United States, we wish success to them. I hope that they will be willing to cooperate constructively. Dear ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to say the following. The plethora of problems faced by the international community is extremely complex, and sometimes it seems that it is impossible to address it. In Russia, we often hear that the road will be covered by someone who is on the road. We need to seek support in those moral values that have ensured the progress of our civilizations. These are honesty, integrity, industry, responsibility, and self-confidence. We should not yield to depression. We need to fight the crisis. We need to join our intellectual, our spiritual, and material resources. Such consolidation of efforts is unthinkable without mutual trust, and not only among business communities. And we now speak about the crisis of confidence in the banking sector. I would expand this notion. Our understanding of this problem, we should speak about confidence among nations, among states, and confidence is something that we need to address. Confidence and solidarity will help us overcome our today's difficulties. They will help us overcome many tumults, and they will help us to achieve prosperity and well-being in the 21st century. Thank you for your kind attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have about 15 minutes for discussion, and I'm pleased that I'm joined here by my colleagues from the Foundation Board, Peter Brabeck-Letmathe, the Chairman of the Board of Nestlé, Michael Dell, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Dell, and Carlos Ghosn, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Renault and also of Nissan in Japan. So, who would like to shoot first?
Sure, I'll go first. Mr. Prime Minister, you spoke of the dangers of excessive government involvement, and I found myself really struck by that comment and surprised to hear that comment. 6 months ago, I would have never imagined hearing that comment from yourself, but I have to say I completely agree with you. Now to my question. When I look at the IT sector, you've made some pretty considerable progress bringing computers into schools, bringing government services online, bringing better internet access across Russia. But when we look at the level of talent, scientific and technical talent, there is still room to further utilize the IT sector. So my question to you really is, how can we as an IT sector help you broaden the economy as you move out of the crisis and take advantage of that great scientific talent that you have?
Does it work? It does. Oh, you see, the trick is that we don't need any help. We are not invalids. We are not We do not have any limited capacity. People with limited capacities, abilities should be helped. Pensioners should be helped. Developing countries should be helped. And help must be not only simply in the form of giving the money, perpetuating the circle of poverty. Why negotiations in the WTO ended in an impasse? Because rich countries cannot meet the needs of the developing economies halfway. Let's be frank about it and open. One must look for a compromise. Speaking of Russia and our partners in Europe, in the United States and in Asia, one needs fully fledged, equal partnership. In many respects, our economies are complementary. Indeed, we managed to achieve quite a lot in terms of developing informatization, as we say, of our society. A few years ago, imagine a village in Siberia with a computer system and internet access. We did it. We made it. We have a government program for that. You mentioned it. In every school, I stress, every Russian school has both computer rooms and internet access. In the Far East, in the Far North, everywhere. This movement of IT in the society would continue as dictated by the development of both economy and society. Now no one would ever think about doubting information opportunities offered by Internet as an open source for information and for opinion sharing. You may like something, you may not like something, but complete freedom is the word here. Speaking of the intentions of the state, we have a program, a federal program. It is called Electronic Russia, or IT Russia. We intend to continue this individual program in cooperation with our partners, and it is with great pleasure that we will accept, as we've done before, investments into this sector. And we will continue developing our own products and presenting them to the global markets. Many companies of Russia are major operators of the cellular services in a number of developed economies of the world, and we will continue facilitating such exports in the future. We have quite a few coinciding interests and needs, and in this area, of course, we will find a few more. Many companies, I would not name them, work in these areas. Of course, it doesn't only deal with hardware, as they say, but also and mostly with intellectual products, the software. Here we have a few things to offer to the market, and I am grateful for you for this allusion. Traditionally, we have a very strong school of mathematics in Russia, and our programmers are one of the best in the world, no doubt about it. And nobody would contest it here, even our Indian colleagues. I would say, let's do the job. Thank you.
Carlos? Yeah, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, you've been relentlessly supporting and developing the emergence of Russian champions in industries, in commodities, in energy, and we've been seeing it blooming for the last years. Some of these Russian champions and new companies are being harshly now challenged with this crisis. Are you going to support them? In what way, under what conditions, and eventually what are the priorities?
Well, many countries of the world follow the path of supporting both development of those national champions and further supporting them. We have quite a few of them. Of course, everyone knows about Gazprom, but there are others as well. Not only in the area of energy, but speaking of energy, Rosneft, Lukoil, 100% private company with international assets. Other largest global players are also available in our country. We will continue supporting them. How? First, we will further reduce taxes. We've already done so. In the energy sector, we've already launched the reduction of the tax burden on the energy companies, and will continue taking similar steps in the future. We've reduced the income test from 24 to 20%, which also has to do with the competitivity of our champions. If needs be, we will help them, and already are helping them in refinancing their debts and their borrowing in the foreign financial institutions. We specifically allocated for this purpose $50 billion and established a special mechanism for the support of such companies. The resources have been allocated rather. I don't know the figure of allocation, but we are working on this. I see here the faces of the owners of those companies, and they know that we're talking dozens of billions of US dollars. Western financial institutions are also aware that by supporting our major companies, we, for all practical purposes, improve the liquidity of the European financial institutions, which are now in difficult situation. But not only energy. We will continue supporting the small and medium enterprises, admittedly, by increasing the custom duties on some types of equipment imported. We intend to support our domestic producers. I think we do it reasonably without being extreme, but at the same time, we reduce to zero some import duties on high-tech items which are not produced in Russia, thus helping retooling the Russian industries. This support is addressed both to the champions, big business, and to SMEs. We also introduced the higher rate of amortization from 10 to 20% per annum, and we adopted a law allowing the regions to reduce their taxes on small and medium enterprises from 15 to 5%. The SME support funds are operational also both through the banking system, with the resources coming from the federal sources, and through regional structures. We will continue supporting SMEs in all industries, including agriculture, to which we pay special attention. I would not bother you with numbers and figures, which are considerable, but to repeat, we would continue paying a priority attention to the development of agriculture to ensure our food security of our country and contributing to the global food security, of course. What I mean is the increased contribution of Russia in addressing those problems. So our work is implemented in many directions, and we intend to continue it in the same way.
Yes, Chairman, you said in your speech, do away with virtual money and concentrate and create an economy of real value. And as a representative of the consumer goods industry, we like this statement because we are in the real economy. Now, Russia and its growing middle class is one of the world's biggest and most exciting markets that we have, without any doubt. So if you would ask me what is the challenge that we're confronting in Russia, I would say perhaps distribution and supply chain. And especially when you are moving outside of St. Petersburg and Moscow. The farther you go, the more the supply chain becomes an issue, because Russia's distribution is a fascinating combination of old and new. You have both extremes very close together. So my questions are basically, is this a great opportunity, perhaps a crisis, to develop the necessary infrastructure and accelerate the modernization of the trade on the one hand? How can you really support the consumer demand and employment, which is very important, of course, for our industry? And finally, you said the financial system is something weak. We start to feel it, that perhaps the financial resources are not getting to the whole supply chain. From the farmers, you start to feel here, up to the distribution, to the retailers. So those would be my questions I would have.
Well, you've finished your question mentioning farmers. On behalf of farmers, I'm sending you a signal to a person who has to do with distribution of all this produce. Money doesn't only do not reach from the banks to the networks, but they do not go from networks to the farmers. Your criticisms with regard to the banks I accept, but speaking about the retail networks, I would like to hear some more from you. But this doesn't remove responsibility from us to develop infrastructure, both transport infrastructure and financial infrastructure. We are concerned with the strengthening and enlarging the financial sector and the prevailing developments in the global financial area. And of course in Russia, is only prompting us to be more active, and we will do that. We will do that very carefully, bearing in mind a certain specificity of the financial system of Russia. You've mentioned that the further you go from the mega cities, the more difficult it is to work. But in the countryside, regional banks carry the bulk of the burden, and the regional financial institutions who prove their viability would also be supported by us. Speaking of the transport infrastructure, we all understand that in such an enormous country like Russia, unfortunately, this cannot be resolved very quickly, but resources allocated for the development of transport infrastructure are incomparable in any terms with the resources that were allocated in the Soviet Union or in Russia previously for these purposes. We will continue working, continue improving the conditions for all types of business, including that you've mentioned. I believe that business is extremely important, that has proven very well itself in Russia, working reliably and in a very stable manner. And we are satisfied. Please do not doubt that we will continue looking for opportunities to get extra help to them.
Our opening session. And on behalf of all of you, I would like to thank first President Merz for expressing his views of welcome. And I would like to thank particularly Prime Minister Putin for having shared his views and his policies in so many different areas. Please join me thanking again our opening speaker.